My both sister and brother went to Binghamton, and I wasn't as academically oriented, but I was pre-law. So I came to Oneonta as a freshman, and I was a double major in poli-sci and history. And I did theater all through my life growing up. In high school, I was a lead in some plays, but I wanted to make money. I wanted to be a lawyer. So it was, but I had that theater bug in me. So I went to some of the shows at the Goodrich and the plays, and I said, I should probably audition. And the first show I think I auditioned for my freshman year was School for Scandal, Richard Sheridan's restoration play. And I got cast in a part, and I was so excited. I was a servant. I told all my friends to come see the show. And then when the show was performed, I only entered during blackouts, and I changed the set. So that was my start of my theatrical career at Oneonta. When I went to Oneonta, I lived in Bacon, Denison. I lived in Bacon. Then the second year I was lived in Denison, and I was a RA. But then I just started, I said, do I want to be a rich lawyer, or do I want to have a rich life and be in the theater? So my sophomore year, I think the second semester sophomore year, I switched to a double major of theater and philosophy. And I got into a great group of friends at Oneonta, and just started doing plays. I loved my faculty there. They mentored me, they nurtured me, they supported me. Dr. Siegfried, Dr. Pixley, Dr. Kotke, and Dr. Miller, they were real influences in my life. And I got the bug to direct Mask and Hammer, which I hope is still an active student group. I applied for funds, and they gave me money. I think it was a whopping $10, $25 to direct a one-act play, Edward Albee's The Sandbox. I directed that, and I fell in love with that. My faculty all came and supported me. And then I guess senior year, I directed one of the highlights of my life, even though I've directed tons of shows. I directed Martin Sherman's Bent, which is a play about the Nazi persecution of homosexuals in World War II. And we were in that, now I forgot the name of the building. It's still a little theater because I came back to visit. It's opposite Bacon Denison, little alumni hall. Is that what it's called? That little 100? Yes, Michelle saying yes. So I directed there, and it was sold out. I mean, people were in the aisles. We broke fire codes. And it was one of the top theatrical experiences of my life. And people came to me, and again, this is back when homophobia was more rampant than it was today, but people came to see that show, and they said, Rich, this really changed my mind about people who are gay. And I was like, wow, theater can have this great influence. So I was hooked, and like I said, got a great bunch of friends. So I directed Bent. My friend directed me in David Mamet's Sexual Perversity in Chicago. And we just did a ton of shows. And I became such good friends with my friends at Oneonta that every year they get together in New York, and we have a party called the Snowflake. And it's been close to 40 years going on. Every year we get together. We're still in touch. We have a Facebook group. I'm friends with Colby Thomas, some of you may know. We actually, I think 15, 20 of us came to Oneonta a couple of summers ago and spent time together. One of my best friends and roommates who was in Bent and who directed me in Sexual Perversity in Chicago, he came to Pittsburgh, and we took our bikes. We biked from Pittsburgh to Washington, D.C., 350 miles. So this is with my college friend. So some of you on this call 40 years from now, you might go on a biking trip with one of your Oneonta friends. So I just have so many wonderful memories of Oneonta, going to Hartwick College and going to Table Rock. I don't know if you guys still do that, seeing the sunsets. Back when I went to school last century in Oneonta, the drinking age was 18, and there were 52 bars downtown. So the professors, some of my philosophy professors would go to the bars. It was a really great time. Going on through my notes. After college, after I graduated, I moved back to New York City, my hometown, and a bunch of my Oneonta friends, we started a theater group called the Potpourri Players. And we did children's theater, and we toured around New York City, Manhattan, the 5 boroughs, performing theater. And we came back to Oneonta. I directed a production of Kennedy's Children, which is a great play with a lot of monologues, and we performed in the Union. It was really, really wonderful. Also, interspersed in my years at college, one of the things that was very important for me is social justice. So I spent 17 summers in Sussex, New Jersey, working at a camp for underprivileged kids from New York City. Not doing theater, it was just a place to get kids who lived, I think 95% of the kids were below the poverty line. They didn't pay for camp. It was a real wonderful experience. And that nurtured a love of me of teaching and getting into that. So After I graduated college, I remember I would remember, if you guys were taking notes and paying attention, I was a theater and philosophy major. So I went to an employment agency and they had a list of like 1,000 skills. Could you type? Can you file? Can you do this? And I said, hey, I graduated Oneonta as a theater philosophy major. I could juggle and quote Plato. And there weren't a lot of jobs there for that. So I got a job working at FAO Schwarz, if you guys know that big toy store. And I did that, and I didn't know what to do with my life. I acted in some off Broadway plays, very small, tried to do some theater with my friends. And then I said, teaching at camp all summer, and I love teaching. What about, going to grad school? So I went to something called URTA. I don't know if you guys know about that, University Resident Theater Association. And I applied to a bunch of schools for an MFA in acting and an MFA in directing. And I got called back to a bunch of MFA acting programs, and I got called back to a bunch of MFA directing programs. And I love both of them. I love acting. I'm an equity actor now. And I love, directing, and I love acting. I didn't know which school should I go to. And then I thought in my brain, hey, it might be easier for an MFA director to act in shows while in grad school than it would be for an MFA actor to direct shows. So I decided to go for MFA in directing, and I went to the University of Pittsburgh, and they pretty much paid my tuition and gave me a small stipend, enough to pay some rent and to eat ramen noodles 30 days a month. And I did that for 3 years. And I was sort of a little bit of a workaholic. I think I did something like 24 shows in 3 years. I would just direct and act, direct and act, direct and act, direct and act. So I did that. While I was there, another one of my influences, one of my friends started a company called Pittsburgh Playback Theater. And Playback is, I don't know if you guys know what that is. If you actually Google, I think it's Playback North America or something. If you Google that, my picture is on the national cover, but there's playback all over the world, in cities all over the world, in countries all over the world. It's not whose line is it anyway, improv. I don't call it group therapy improv. I'm actually going after this to teach an improv class. It's a kind of theater where you go into an audience and people tell stories and you play them back in an abstract way. So I could talk more about that if you guys have questions, but we've performed all over the country, and we've performed, so many different groups. It's a real important part of my life. So I'm a founding member of that company and artistic director, and I've been doing that for 34 years. So I went to grad school, and it was, Pitt had me teach classes, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. Then I got married, and then I didn't know what to do. I did a year-long tour of children's theater, since that was still part of my love. I think I've played every K through 12 school in Western Pennsylvania, Ohio area. And then I went on my journey, like, what do I do with my life? So I loved acting, I loved directing. So I started traveling around the country. My wife and I moved to 5 different cities in 5 years. We lived in DC, we lived in Lynchburg, Virginia, Knoxville, Tennessee, Spartanburg, South Carolina. And I would have some teaching positions. I taught at Randolph-Macon Women's College in Lynchburg, Virginia. I went down to the University of Tennessee, and I did a show there, and I was doing shows. One of the big equity theaters in Pittsburgh, City Theater, called me back to direct David Mamet's American Buffalo, which was a huge success. And then and then after those 5 years, my wife got a tenure track position. She has a PhD in art history. She got a tenure track position in Spartanburg, South Carolina at Converse College, which is not a big theater mecca. There's not a lot of theater going on in Spartanburg. So I didn't know what to do. And then, I was going to follow her, and actually a company in town offered me to play Stanley Kowalski in Streetcar Named Desire. And that was a bucket list role, but I was like, do I want to be in Spartanburg? And right when I didn't know what to do, University of Pittsburgh called me up and said, hey, Rich, faculty member just left. Would you like to have a non-permanent position, a year-to-year position, coming to teach at Pitt? And we'd like you to direct this play. So I was like, what should I do? What should I do? And then I said, let me go back. So my wife and I were actually apart for a year. We saw each other on weekends. And I loved teaching at Pitt. The students loved me. I won Teacher of the Year awards, all this stuff. So after a year, my wife made a tough decision, and she gave up a tenure track position at Converse College, and she came to Pittsburgh to be with me. And even though my position was only a year-to-year position, she ended up getting a job at the Carnegie Museum of Art, a teaching all the docents and tour guides, and she eventually got her own tenure track position. So I taught at Pitt for 6 years, but since it was a non-permanent position, it was like 6 years. I could only teach there for 6 years. So my resume was going on through the winds again. So I had an interview at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln and Denison University in Ohio, all over. Right when I didn't know what to do, a school right down the road called Point Park University said, hey, would you like to come to our school and be the chair of our theater department? And I was like, sure, because my wife was getting established here. So I taught at Pitt for 6-7 years, and then I've been at Point Park for 23 years. And I'm a full professor now. I think maybe Michelle, I sent you some old information. I'm a full professor now. I've been, I have my equity card, so I've done a bunch of shows, and I've directed at just about all the equity theaters in town. Let's see. One thing I want to talk about is Oneonta. Let me see some yeses. Is Oneonta involved with ACTF at all? Do you guys get involved with the American College Theater Festival? Yeah. So I'll talk about that a little bit so you guys know about it. My last 5 years at Pitt, and then my first 5 years at Point Park when I was chair, we got involved. I got us involved with the American College Theater Festival. And you guys know about the Irene Ryan Scene and Monologue competition. So you know it's a pretty tough cut. They usually, we're in the same region. New York and Pittsburgh is in the same region too. So usually 200 people go to the Irene Ryan from the whole region, and then there's a vicious cut. They cut it from 200 to 32 actors. And then they do another vicious cut from 32 actors to 16 actors, and then they pick 1 or 2. Well, for 10 years running, I had a streak that every year I had at least 2 students make the final round of 16. And I think in 4 of those years, 3 or 4 of my students went on to the national festival. So I loved ACTF. Unfortunately, we don't do it anymore. Most of the shows, again, I'll brag about myself a little bit, even though I'm very humble. A lot of the shows that I directed in Pittsburgh got picked as some of the best plays of the year. And I'll tell you some of my highlights, and I'll wrap this up soon. I got to play Edgar in King Lear with Ralph Waite from the Waltons. And some of you kids might not know who Ralph Waite is, but the Waltons was the #1 show in America in the 1970s. And I remember being a little kid sitting in my underwear watching TV and seeing the Waltons, even though I was a city kid. It was really cool seeing Ralph Waite. And then I got to share a dressing room with him and play that. It was directed by this guy, David Wheeler from, Amethyst, that's a beautiful name. She said she watches the Waltons with her grandmother. That just says grand. I can't read the chat. It was directed by David Wheeler, who directed, he was a resident director at the ART in Boston, Cambridge, and he directed Al Pacino and De Niro and all these people. And he said, he came to us and he said, why do you want to be in Pittsburgh? Why don't you want to go to New York? And I said, well, in Pittsburgh, I could live. I got a house, and the house that I'm sitting in right now in my dining room was $87,000. You can't really get in New York City. It's a little sort of tough. So I like Pittsburgh, that I could have a life. I could have a humble house, and I really enjoyed that. I directed a play called The Mother Effer with the Hat. I usually don't like profanity, and a play called Small Engine Repair for a Bare Bones Company. And that was really great. And I don't know if you guys know who Casey Cott is. I'm going to start name dropping now, but Casey Cott was on Riverdale. He was doing that. I directed 2 shows at St. Michael's Theater in Burlington, Vermont. And that's again, I was talking to Scott before this. Theater is a big connection place. So one of my friends was a professor at St. Michael's College, and he liked me. So he was like, yo, Rich, you want to come out here and direct a couple of equity shows? So that was a fun summer. I directed American Buffalo and Collected Stories at City Theater. I directed Wild Duck, an Ibsen play for Quantum Theater, which is a really cool theater in Pittsburgh that doesn't have a theater. They perform at different locations all around the city. It gets the audience to come to them. I acted in a great fun play called Private Eyes by Stephen Dietz, and I was selected as Best Actor in Pittsburgh. I acted in the first stage production of Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs. We did a production of that in Pittsburgh, and I don't know if you guys watch The Walking Dead, but Greg Nicotero is works on Walking Dead, and so his like uncle Sam Nicotero was in our show. So we got the original ear from Reservoir Dogs in our production. That was a lot of fun. teaching at Point Park, for 23 years. I love my time at Pitt, and I love my time at Point Park, but Point Park was just picked as one of the top 10 schools in the country with the most students on Broadway. So there are a ton of students on Broadway. We have the Christine and Phantom of the Opera. We have 2 leads in Chicago. One of our students, former students, played the the lead in Rent from the national tour. Now he's playing King George in Hamilton. There are students all over Broadway, which is a lot of fun, although they all lost their jobs for COVID this past year, and it's really tough. And then a couple of my highlights. I don't know if you guys saw the publicity I sent, but a bunch of years ago, I was selected as the Theater Person of the Year in Pittsburgh by Pittsburgh Magazine. And it's because I directed 3 shows in a row. I directed You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown at Point Park. The second it opened, I started directing Collected Stories at an Equity Theater, City Theater in Pittsburgh. And then I directed, right after that opened, the next day I went into a rehearsal and I directed Welcome Home, which was an adaptation of Dermock's The Visit. And so I was out of the house 6 nights a week for like 4 or 5 months when I had 2 little kids, 5 and 3. So my wife did all the changing in diapers. That was really important. And I'm almost done. Let me just do some more name dropping. I directed a production of 1984, which was one of my favorite books in high school. And George Orwell's son came to Pittsburgh, and he, it was really cool meeting him. I directed To Kill a Mockingbird, and the original scout from the movie To Kill a Mockingbird with Gregory Peck, she came in and I met her, which was really cool. I worked also, I didn't mention this, I was an associate artistic director at City Theater. One day someone goes, "Hey, Rich, could you pick somebody up from the airport?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to." And it was Anne Bogart. I don't know if you guys study Anne Bogart viewpoints, but she's one of my heroes. And 2 of my good friends are in her City Theater company, SITI. I met Lisa Crone. I don't know if you guys know who Lisa Crone is, the lyricist, the book writer of Fun Home. That's through Oneonta connection. Her partner was Peggy Healy, who was one of my friends, and I was friends with Peggy, and she got to know Lisa. And Point Park brings in a ton of guest artists, a lot more exciting than I am. They brought in Christopher Durang, so he was one of my heroes. I got to meet him. Stephen Flaherty, the composer of Ragtime. So I love my students. I love teaching at Point Park. I love, like I said, I love Oneonta. Going back, we went to Colby's house a couple of summers ago, and just the memories of being in all those theaters, from the Goodrich to the little arena theater to that little alumni hall, just seeing the hills and trudging up the hills and the mountain. I remember, I told you I lived in Bacon my first year, Denison as RA my second year, and then I lived off campus. And I forgot the street. It was either River Street. It was a couple miles away, but my rent back then was $55 a month, including all utilities. So it's like I'm old, but yeah. So everybody in theater that you meet or talk to has a different path, but I was really nurtured by Oneonta. Here's someone going in to be a lawyer, in pre-law, and I just loved theater. And I think if the student paper is still the Oneonta Globe, I think there was an article written about me, the Oneonta Globe, and the headline said, "The smell of grease paint versus the juggle of coins." Like, do you want to make money or do you want to make theater? And one of the things I remember saying in that article was like, I had a vision of my life. I said, I know I could be a rich lawyer somewhere and have a big house with a tennis court and a pool. And I said, but I can imagine myself being in an office, looking out the window and saying, man, I really should have tried theater. I really wanted to do theater. And one of the nicest things my wife ever said to me when we got married, because when we got married, I did that children's tour for a year and I was an unemployed actor. She said she never cared if I made any money. She just knew I was passionate about the arts. So it's a very difficult profession. And what I tell my freshman students at Point Park is that, you guys all know what actors equity is. It's the union, and not everybody could get into the union. It's sort of tough. It's that catch-22, but at any given time, 70 to 75% of the members of Actors Equity are unemployed. Out of the remaining 25%, 20% make less than $5,000 a year. So you're really talking about 5% of the equity actors who make a living. And then of course, there were the Tom Cruises who make $9 billion a year, doing that. But So what I say to students, do it with a passion, work harder. What I try to teach my students is just to have that dedication to work hard, take in what you can from your professors. They're there for you, and you guys are there to support each other. So like I said, there are friends, my Oneonta theater friends have been my friends for 40 years. We support each other through marriages. I was the best man at 2 of my Oneonta friends' weddings. We've had deaths, spouses' deaths, we're there to support each other. So you guys lean on each other, you create your own theater. We have this crazy time of COVID now, and that 40 years from now, you're gonna be talking to some more Oneonta students when you're invited back, and you can say, I remember when there was COVID and we couldn't do any theater at all, but you'll have those memories with each other. So that's a brief, even though I took for a long time, a brief account of my life. So if you guys have any questions about working in academia, about being an equity actor, about being a professional director, about my improv group, Pittsburgh Playback Theater, anything you want, I always Venmo $20 to the first person who asks me a question. So I'm joking. But so if anybody has any questions, fire away. And I don't know if Scott or Michelle could choose and pick, fire away. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead, Kylie.
Hi, Rich. It's so nice to meet you. My name is Kylie. I was actually wondering if you had any input or advice for auditioning, because I'm an actor. I love to act. And I was just wondering if you had any advice, because auditions are really where I think I get stuck sometimes. So recommendations for choosing material and the audition itself.
Yeah, well, if you got something to write down or take notes in your phone, the 2 books that I share with my students are John Jory's Tips on Auditioning. He has some great tips, and he talks about what should be in your book. You should have a contemporary comic monologue, contemporary dramatic monologue. You should have a classical comic monologue, classical dramatic monologue. You should have different aspects. And Michael Shurtleff's book on auditioning. Those are the 2 texts that it could really go on. But then Kylie, the main thing is everybody gets nervous at auditions. I still get a little nervous at auditions. If you don't get nervous at auditions, you're not really an actor, because you don't want to be asleep. So you get better on your 10th audition to your 50th audition. So I would just keep on auditioning. Every student show, just keep on auditioning. Speaking about auditions, Point Park is a very competitive school as a conservatory to get into. So I've just, musical theater program is really crazy. They see thousands of students to audition to pick 25. For the acting program, sometimes we'll see 300-400, but this past week, usually I go to Chicago and LA and New York to see auditions, but we've been doing it on Zoom. So I've watched 250 auditions just this past week. And what we want, Kylie, what directors are looking for is we want someone who could bring themselves to the piece, be honest and truthful. A lot of times in high school, you just get a lot of schmacting where people are trying too hard and acting, and we just want to believe what the character is saying. So I tell actors, keep it real. Would a real person be saying this? Make sure there's a variety and dynamics in your audition piece, that you're not doing a monologue that's angry too long or sad too long, but you want to just have a lot of variety and different beats in there. But the more you do it, the easier it gets.
Okay. Thank you so much.
I'll Venmo you $20. Look out for that.
Perfect. I'll put it in the chat.
I will, I'll seed the ground here, see if it kicks anything off. Any thoughts, suggestions, advice on grad school versus just making your way? That's
an excellent question. So yeah, what I tell students, and for Point Park, when I was at Pitt, more students went on to graduate school than Point Park. Point Park is a conservatory, we have fewer students going to the grad school. What I always say to students is that if you leave school and you're getting gigs, you're getting hired, backstage, whatever, or getting roles, then I would say keep on doing that. But if you're gonna go to New York or Chicago or LA and be a waiter 80 hours a week and only do 1 show a year, if you could go through IRTA or a program where you don't have to go into further student debt, but usually there are a lot of assistantships, so they'll help you teach. and you could get training for 3 years where you could do a lot of more shows and get your craft, I would say go to grad school. But it's a difficult choice, because sometimes if you want to make this your profession, you can't like audition for your first 3 shows and not get cast and say, well, I'm giving this up. You know, this is a kind of profession that if you get knocked down 9 times, you got to get up 10. So, you know, some grad schools are preparing you to go out and be a professional. Some grad schools, and if that's your goal, you should look for a grad school where they have a rep theater company. You're going to get your equity card, and you know, people out of that grad program are working. Some grad schools, you know, they gear more towards academia. So since I knew I loved teaching, there's 2 routes. You could either get a PhD or MFA, which is a terminal degree. But I knew that with an MFA, I'd be eligible to teach at universities all across the country. And since I love teaching, and since, you know, I still had that little bit of my Brooklyn mother, you know, telling me, don't be an unemployed actor, I knew that if I could work in academia, I would have health benefits. Raising a family is important to me. So I said, well, if I'm in academia, I could, you know, have a steady job, have health benefits, and then my summers are free, so I could work professionally over the summer. So you got to decide, you know, Scott, I'm a fan of students making lists, the pros and cons. But, you know, some students, when they get to New York, Chicago, all they're doing is getting a job to pay their rent, and they're never doing their art. So in that case, I would say grad school will be a benefit. Although some grad schools don't like hiring, you know, getting 22-year-old grad students right out of school, because some of them, they want you to teach. And so they don't really want 22-year-old teaching a 21-year-old. So some grad schools say, go out into the world and, you know, get some experience and then come back. So cool. Other questions? And that's my dog saying hello. I don't know if the mailman's coming. So excuse my dog. Any other questions? He might want to come on Zoom. So
We're very pro dog here.
yeah, I remember back in the day, my friend would have the dog running on the quad waiting for him outside class.
I have another question if no one has one. I want to know what you think is the best piece of advice or like most valuable thing you learned while you were at Oneonta, and how it helped you after you graduated.
That's a great question. The best thing I learned was one of my friends said, hey, Rich, there's a coffee company called Starbucks. Buy some stock in it. I bet it's going to make some money. The real best advice was just my professors at Oneonta, all of them, Siegfried, Pixley, they loved what they were doing. They loved their art, so they passed that love of theater on to me. So I can't remember one specific thing, Kylie, but it was just seeing them as role models. I remember one of my professors, Siegfried, like I told you, I was really into social activism. So he was like, hey, Rich, I'm going to 3 Mile Island to protest against nuclear, you know, the nuclear plants there. You want to come? And I was like, yeah. So I went with him and we camped out, you know, held up our protest signs. So it was both a combination, Kylie, of my professors and my friends, because, you know, some student work, and I hope Mask and Hammer is still going strong, because even though all the Oneonta productions were great and I had a fun time and all of them, you know, directing Bent for myself with my peers without faculty, and we had to come up with everything, was really powerful too. So the more experience you have, you know, working on your own art is great. And I think Spalding Gray once said, rather than wait for the indifferent machine of to make up its mind whether they're going to cast you or not, create your own work, do your own work. You know, if you like performing, have one of your friends say, hey, direct me in this play, I really want to do it. And you just learn from that.
Also, like branching off of your activism, I'm also super passionate about social justice, and I'm a theater and communication studies double major. So any advice on how to blend those two things? Because I'd love to work with like queer stories and like queer activism and feminism and things like that. So how to tie that into theater? I
Yeah,
guess.
that's a great question. Again, I think what's cool about theater is that we can do many things. So I would say whatever LGBTQ plus clubs there are in Oneonta or any city that you go into, go there and say, hey, what can I do to help? Can we do, it's a classic. I don't know if you do it in New York, but every Valentine's Day we would do the Vagina Monologues by Eve Ensler. Well, how can I use my theater performance level to get people in, to have a group? So find things, whatever city you're in, that, hey, I'm passionate about feminism, passionate about LGBTQ rights. What can I do? Can I, do a series of monologues? Can we say, let's, Larry Kramer, I don't know if you guys studied Larry Kramer, who started ACT UP. He was a real inspiration for me of just, get out into the streets and do stuff. But they need theater people for that, because sometimes, I give my students a poll at the beginning of the semester, and they poll 2,500 Americans, and they asked them what their greatest fear was. And number one, 40% of the people said speaking in public. And number 7 on that list was death. So my joke about that was that if there's a funeral, most people would rather be in the casket than delivering the eulogy. Here in theater, where we can do some public speaking. So that's a great benefit to any social justice rights, because they need people to be spokesmen. So, don't just say, well, because I'm doing theater, I can't work on my other, social justice. You could do both.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you.
Sure.
I can ask a side question because I'm curious. What were you doing in Knoxville?
Knoxville, I think that time I followed my wife. So she got a teaching position at the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, and I was there. Oh, well, this is a great juxtaposition of theater. So I was there. I acted in a production of Ant, Ann and Lemon down in Tennessee. And what was funny, I got cast. You wouldn't do that now because you can't do this. They don't want white people playing other roles. But I got cast as Ramando Lopez in Ant, Ann and Lemon. I guess because I'm from New York and I was in Tennessee. So I was a Latino.
Close enough.
So I did that there, and I was an encyclopedia salesman. And what was funny about it, I got called back during that year when I lived in Tennessee, and I directed American Buffalo at this big equity house, and it was a huge hit. It was picked as one of the best plays of the year. And after the show, this is one of the few times in my life that happened to me. We had a cast party, and the reviewer from the biggest paper, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, came up to me and said, I've never told this to anybody before, but I just saw your show, and I just wrote the best review I've ever written in my life. And inside, I'm doing somersaults, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Thank you for coming to see the show. And I was interviewed on TV, the next day about American Buffalo, and it was really great. And then in professional theater, once opening night comes, it's your last paycheck. So I flew back down to Tennessee, where I was an encyclopedia salesman, and so I was the toast of the town in Pittsburgh, and I was nothing in Knoxville. So yeah, I was there for a year following my wife.
I also wound up in Knoxville following my wife.
Well, Deanna?
Hi, sorry. I'm Deanna. Hi. I was just wondering, I know like making connections is huge in this field. How would you suggest start it? Like, I know I've already started making connections just by like people I know now, but like going out in New York City and like actually making connections,
That's an excellent question. So one of my things I have my students do, and it's easier in Pittsburgh or small cities across the country than New York, but I say just Google and find out the names of all the artistic directors at theaters that you like. So if theater is doing, schmaltzy musicals, maybe you do love that, but, follow that. But, this theater, the Manhattan Theater Club, which is a great, theater group in New York, the New York, Shakespeare Festival, Oscar Eustace is now the artistic director. So find out who the artistic directors are of these theaters, and then go see their shows, and then try to meet these people. I call it schmoozing. So, sometimes there's negative connotation to schmoozing, like you're brown nosing or you're sucking up. No, it's called being friendly. Performers, if you play the trumpet is your instrument. If you're a painter, you got the paintbrushes. When you're a performer, you are what you're selling. So you have to go to these opening nights and, just be friendly. You could walk up, Oscar Eustace, I don't know if you guys know him. He's the artistic director, but he helped, produce Hamilton. He helped produce Angels in America. I went to see him. I was at the Williamstown Theater Festival in Massachusetts. He was hanging out during intermission by himself. So I was like, I just schmoozed. I say, hey, Oscar, how you doing? And so people are generally pretty friendly. So Deanna, find people, obviously your Oneonta connections, the alumni office will help you, hey, you graduated Oneonta, can I talk to you? But find theaters that you like, go to see their shows, try to talk to the artistic directors. You have to start on the ground floor and just say, hey, can I be an assistant? Can I be an assistant director? Or can I work in the front, box office? And then you impress them. The reason why Pitt called me back to teach rather than other grad students, I impressed them by my work ethic, by, doing well. So it's reputation. So it just, everybody's insecure and everybody's shy. You just have to go up and go, hi, I'm Deanna. This is, I really like your theater, and just schmooze, just be friendly with them, because that'll help you make connections.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I didn't mention too, when I was in Oneonta, it was only 4 hours. Maybe the speed limit's better now to get to New York City. And some of my Oneonta friends, we would leave Oneonta after class on Friday, drive down to New York. We'd see a Broadway show on Friday, we'd see 2 on Saturday and 1 on Sunday, or we would see 3 movies. And this was back in the day. Again, this is last century when tickets were on $100, $200. We would get $10 standing room only seats. We had 2 tricks. These might be a little illegal. We would get $10 standing room only seats. We'd stand in the back and then we'd look around where there were no shows and we would sit down and grab a seat. Or I think you could still do this. We would find out the running times of the shows and when intermission was. And then we just come in on the second act and sit down and say someone, hey, what happened in the first act? And we would see just a ton of Broadway shows, but we did that multiple times, going in and seeing, 4 plays or movies, in a week. So, see theater, see theater, see theater, see theater. That'll help you too. And I'll try to open up the chat now. Okay, so it's Amethyst, am I pronouncing that right? What a beautiful name. And she
Amethyst.
Amethyst?
Yeah, like the gemstone.
Like that's a beautiful name. So yeah,
Thank you.
You watched, so you saw Ralph Waite with your grandparents, and who'd you play in Charlie Brown?
I was just ensemble, and I also was the tree with 1 leaf.
There's no such thing as just ensemble. I bet you were the best tree with 1 leaf that ever existed, and you're a good man, Charlie Brown.
Yeah, it was with a local theater company here in Oneonta.
Oh, cool. Beautiful. Yes,
And
Dan?
Deanna, yes, feel free to step in.
For like resume purposes and stuff like that, like what's like a suggestion to like make yourself like stand out a little bit? Like, is there something like you would look for that like should,
Well, it's tough when you're starting out. Like when you start out, when I graduated Oneonta, I probably listed, I was in West Side Story in Canarsie High School, so when you start off, you just want to try to pad your resume. So you've done more than 1 shows. But so when you're younger and starting out, I would list my training. Well, I've studied acting, I studied movement, I studied, singing, I studied this. So just try to build up your resume. And as I said, do a bunch of student shows. And then I'm a fan. I'm quirky and, I get bored. Like I said, I saw 250 auditions last week. So I like looking at special skills. So, if you have anything, stuff like I can drive doesn't really excite me. But I once had a student say, I could flop to the ground like a dead fish. So I would say, okay, let me see you do that. And they did that. And then I called them back. I cast them on. Someone once said, I could burp the alphabet. So I'm like, go ahead, let me see you do that. So sometimes, I like quirky special skills, but, every time you get a better credit, you let those high school and community credits, start disappearing. But when you're starting out, you have to sort of bulk it up. So, you can bend the truth a little bit. And if you were in a scene in Glass Menagerie in your Oneonta acting class, you might say, I've done this, in Oneonta or, so just try to build it up, and then just look online for examples of resumes. But, resumes are important, but when I look at students, when I look at actors auditioning, sometimes I might say, oh, do you have a BA in theater? Do you have a BFA in theater? Or did you study at this great school? But if someone came from Oneonta and they gave a great audition, or any school, and someone came from Juilliard and it was a crappy audition, I don't cast people based on that piece of paper. I cast on the person in front of me. So the resumes are important, schools are important, but it's really what you bring to the table. So if you're right for that role, and who cares what degree, what names they had, or who they work with, or how many shows they've done, it's more about you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So.
Hi again. Do you think you would be willing to share an email or something so we can keep in contact with you? I'm sure Michelle has already thought of that, but
I'd be delighted to. My email is rkeitel@pointpark.edu. You could check out the Point Park website. So my name's on the website, but it's rkeitel@pointpark.edu. And, just mention in the subject line that you're a member of the Oneonta family, because then I'll pay attention to your email. Sometimes I get inundated by emails, but if you just say, and this is part of schmoozing, if you say, hey, you came to talk to us and I talked to you, I'll be more willing to talk to you. That's why the quiet ones here who don't ask questions, just by schmoozing, I know Kylie and Deanna a little bit more, and Amethyst. So just schmooze. So yeah, feel free to email me. Again, I can't repay what Oneonta did for me. I wouldn't be where I am without my Oneonta education and my friends. So feel free, send an email. If you come to Pittsburgh, say hello. I'll show you around the beautiful $60 million theater building that's closed now because of COVID. But I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Anyone else? Bueller?
Bueller.
Smoot Hawley, anyone? They don't know this movie.
Yeah. Old school Ferris Bueller.
Bueller, I love that movie, as a matter of fact.
Yes, but do you know the Smoot Hawley Terrace?
Let me do a quick Google search.
Which is what he was referring to when he couldn't get anybody to respond to him. But now you need to go look up what Smoot Hawley Terrace is, because it's actually fairly relevant.
Perfect.
All right, well, then we thank you so much for your time, and we greatly appreciate it. Turns out you and I might actually know some people in common, because a friend of mine from Allegheny now does theater in Pittsburgh, Matt Rush, and his wife, Becky Toth.
Oh, Becky Toth is a brilliant performer. Yeah, I've seen her in a bunch of musicals. Like they're saying, it's a small
world, folks. So take away from that, don't piss anyone off,
right,
because you're bound to run into somebody who knows that person, and that person's not going to hire you after that.
Yep. Reputation. So yeah, it was my delight to be here. Like I said, I have to go bike downtown and teach my improv class tonight. And again, I love when we all get vaccinated and it's safe. I'd be happy to come to Oneonta. I have a lot of really cool acting exercises that I've stolen from other people that I could teach to you guys that really helps my students succeed in ACTF and Broadway. And I love to come there and walk the hills of Oneonta. So I'd be delighted to meet you guys. So thank you.
Well, we would love to have you up, and we'll make that happen as soon as everyone is able to do so safely.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Good luck on your bike in the Pittsburgh hills as opposed to the Oneonta hills, and
yeah,
hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for spending your
Thanks,
Monday
Grace.
afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Grace, and everybody. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we don't have any other business, do we?
All we have to do is Julie, and I think we can save that for next Monday.
Sounds
Since
good.
there's not many people. So